I think that people have seen videos from the Hamas attacks that stay with you in a very gut-wrenching and vivid way. And it can be really difficult to move past the fact that Hamas is really, really bad and should be ended and disbanded. That is something that I think pretty much every reasonable person agrees on. And I think that if we genuinely don't want these barbaric practices to continue, it's really important to recognize the history around this conflict and recognize what is radicalizing people, because the goal should be to stop this behavior. Saying the behavior is bad is true, but it's not enough. And that is the best way to protect the Jewish community. The best way is to go in and be the good guys. I mean, I've listened to people who are military experts who have talked about, if your only goal is to get rid of Hamas, the best way is to go in there and provide aid, take care of civilians, and get them to turn against Hamas. Netanyahu has historically thought that Hamas was good because, and you know, an interesting thing, now this just so happens to occur, I'm not saying anything about it, but if you look at a lot of Netanyahu's like mistakes and less popular things, then a little skirmish happens because the IDF soldiers go in to a holy place and kill and beat up people, and then Hamas responds. And that has been pretty effective to pull focus off of Netanyahu. So that has been helpful for him. And it has been hurtful for the civilians who are living in Israel, frightened on a day-to-day basis. And it is a way for that he has managed to get more control over the population. And it's absolutely tragic. You know, we see, remember the journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, who was actually an American, a Christian, not even of Muslim faith, was wearing the press outfit, was, killed. At first, the soldiers said, no, it wasn't us. Then they admitted it. And then the soldiers showed up to her funeral and attacked the people who were mourning for her. And it's behavior like this that has continued to make people angry, that has radicalized people, who have made Jewish people live in fear because these people have been hurt so deeply that they are responding in ways that should be condemned. And it is making everyone more unsafe. Okay. Good. Who wants a vile person who's anti-Semitic or bigoted? I don't know what that means. The Israeli government has had every chance in the last 70 years to build an integrated society, and they haven't. And I don't think that they're necessarily wanting to, but that would be what I would like. They should have a job. I don't know maybe we're talking about something. Hiring a Marxist. I don't know what. It's a dog whistle calling someone a settler. It's a dehumanizing term. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because my goal is not to dehumanize anyone. So I will take that into consideration. A lot of the Jewish people that I listen to use that terminology, and therefore it seemed like terminology that would discuss the fact that there are illegal settlements happening. But if there is a better way for me to discuss people who are moving into these illegal settlements, I am more than happy to modify my language, because we are dealing with a topic where people who are Jewish have been have had a lot of language and dog whistles used against them that has accumulated in people ending up getting killed. And I do want to be respectful of that, and I care if that feels dehumanizing. So there are more people protest free Palestine. The rest of America is fuming. I don't know. The protesting is backfiring on Palestine. I know it is. Everyone I talk to, you cannot stand the protesting. I'm not saying that any of this stuff has been effective. It really hasn't. I don't think we should have laws against protesting. And I don't think we should punish people for speaking out. Get your money back from school. They lied to you at the university. Oh, the vast majority of this I did not learn at my university. The term apartheid does not apply to the situation. So I've looked into the term apartheid quite a lot. So, and a lot of people are making the statement. So if you can share like why you feel it doesn't apply, I will address that. But I feel like I have kind of addressed the aspects of apartheid and why I feel that it does apply, and why many human rights organizations, including Jewish ones, agree. Jewish people live there with Arabs. Yeah, exactly. The British people came in and definitely made things a lot more complicated. Jewish people and Arabs were living very successfully together during the Ottoman Empire. And then things just got worse and worse bit by bit, you know, and there was a lot of racist sentiment from both factions against each other, a lot of it around, you know, economic insecurity. And, you know, little skirmishes got bigger and bigger, and it has devolved into this ongoing thing where I think parents pass down to their children a fear of the other, which has allowed a lot of human rights abuses to take place. Because if you feel like these people are all terrorists and they're all trying to hurt you, then it's pretty like understandable that some people feel animosity towards a group of people that they feel like is entirely against them due to their religious beliefs. People. Okay. Too many people don't know anything about what's going on over in Gaza. And that's true too. And I think it's frightening. I mean, I have to admit, before I went live on this, I was like, I am crazy for going live about this topic because, one, I can't know everything. I've done a lot of work on it, but I can't know everything. And for two, because people are so emotional, understandably so, it can be really hard to have that conversation. And I have seen over and over again, you know, different political figures having a serious problem being able to have this sort of discussion because, you know, I have just during the stream had a lot of people say that I'm saying things that are racist or anti-Semitic, which I was expecting. So, you know, hence my saying. And other people who got upset when I smiled talking about it, because I think that some of this is so extreme, it's almost to the point of a caricature. And I think that part of how I process it is through, it's not like genuine humor, it's like wry irony. And because otherwise you're just going to cry over it. Because I have seen in preparing for this so many gray babies, you know? And I have seen this. I have seen Israeli people who've been really hurt by this conflict. And I have seen Palestinian people who've been really hurt by this conflict. And I have tried to listen to their voices. And people are living in conditions that we cannot imagine. And I've tried to take the time to really recognize that. And when you put people in inhumane conditions, inhumane things happen. And if we can't deal with that, then it will keep happening. And when we are looking at a government that is supposedly trying to protect its citizens, but actually the behavior that they're engaging in makes their citizens, Jewish citizens, more unsafe, to not call that out of fear of being labeled anti-Semitic is wrong. And it's frightening to go into this space and say things that you see a lot of people getting attacked for, because nobody wants to be seen as a racist, especially people that aren't, And it has stifled our ability to communicate. So I totally understand why people don't know what's going on and have the opinions that they do. Right before I went on here, I Googled Israeli-Palestine conflict. I said Palestine like the train derailment. Another issue, Palestine. And it said that it started on October 7th. On a reasonable website where I should have been able to get solid information. And I'm like, this is just a serious miscarriage of justice that has been ongoing. And most people who are talking about this have no idea that it was happening until the awful atrocities that Hamas committed and were terrible for doing occurred. So the fact that people don't know about all this other stuff is understandable. And I just hope that we can be brave enough to bring these ideas to people and that they will be willing to look at their notions and recognize that this is a little bit more complicated than we've been led to believe. All right. Being terrorists hurts their ability to thrive economically. So that is also equating all Palestinians with being terrorists. And as we know, there's been like 13 that have been killed out of the 4,000 to 5,000. Most of them children. So we have to dispel this concept that everyone living in Gaza is a terrorist. That's just not true. Economic ability often depends on your ability to produce things. And because the bombing didn't start on the 7th, because the bombing didn't start when the hostages were taken, which was wrong and bad, because the bombing has been ongoing and, infrastructure has been targeted, including water treatment plants and electricity, facilities before all this happened. And then the components needed to be able to repair them were not allowed into the area. It has made it so that this community of people cannot have normal economic activity. They cannot even provide for themselves. So it has made them 100% dependent on the water and electricity that is sent in from Israel. Why do you feel this time is different than the last 10 times? Just curious. I don't know what exactly you're talking about there, but that is something that, that I think that we somehow expect that this intense bombing campaign is going to do anything to pull apart Hamas. But bombing has been going on before this terror attack. So it's just not effective. So the things that are occurring right now aren't effective, and it's not going to change anything. And this is the state of affairs. And I think the main thing that can be done is the international community needs to be a little bit braver and needs to continue giving humanitarian support to civilians, both Israeli civilians and civilians who are Palestinian. And we should also condition some of our military aid, millions of dollars worth of military aid we send to Israel every year, on not doing some of the more apartheid-esque things that they're doing. So there are things that can be done. There aren't easy solutions. Nobody wants to admit their ancestors were thieves, but we can choose to build a better world. Yeah, and I mean, it's rough because I was really trying to be like, okay, this is where it started. But it was like one thing led to the next, led to the next, led to the next. There wasn't a clear, like, out of nowhere, this one side got super crazy. So the interesting thing is one of at least a couple years ago, I'm not 1,000,000% sure how accurate this still is, but a couple years ago, there were a lot of areas where Palestinians had been driven out of them that remain unoccupied. So allowing Palestinians to return to unoccupied areas, I think, is a really good step, which is a step that I supported in the past. And I'm assuming, because this is like, I think about a year ago or so, that was the case. So I'm assuming there's still probably some room there. I think this wall separating ethnic groups is not helpful. It's not healthy, and it's not keeping them safe, clearly. So that needs to go down. Someone said, then God is anti-Semitic. The Hebrews have always been under constant punishment for the sin. That's a spicy take right there. Yeah, I'm not even going to comment on that one. I resent that my U.S. tax dollars pays for chat trolls. Just had a shooting in Maine, 22 dead. I don't know if that's talking about the one that occurred, against Jewish people. And there's shootings that happen all the time. And I know that Jewish people have been targeted after this started, and that's wrong and awful. And if that's the situation you're referring to, that's truly terrible, which is why I think it's awful that we are equating challenging a government with people. Because if we fully agree that everything the Israeli government does is something that all Jewish people sign off on, and then the Israeli government does terrible things, that's not good for Jewish people. That to me is anti-Semitic. But that's my opinion. Israel and Palestine Palestine, I don't want to say Palestine, have had so many conflicts. Why does everyone seem surprised? So that is something that I think has led to this discourse being so irrational, is that we as a whole, as a country, were not super paying attention to what was going on with the whole Israel-Palestine thing, partially because it's been going on for a really long time, and it's depressing and can get overwhelming, and people can let go of that and just want to move on with their life because it can be really overwhelming to even know what to do or where you stand. Also, there were laws that were passed against the BDS movement, boycott, divest, and sanction movement against the Israeli government. And that is super anti-First Amendment. You should be able to boycott anybody you want. But there were actually laws that were passed and different things that professors had to sign saying that they didn't support that movement in order to get their job. So there were a lot of things that were done in America to silence people who wanted to boycott Israel for the things that they were doing. And there were a lot of people that there were some people at Harvard, I think, who recently, said some things in support of Palestinians, and then they ended up, and a lot of the things they said were exactly the same things that had been previously said by a Jewish organization, but they were, they put all of their names on trucks and said they were anti-Semitic. So people have been targeted for speaking out about this conflict. It's not a comfortable thing to speak out about. So I think that this awful, terrible attack that it was so vivid that Hamas took part in, it really woke people up to the conflict. And when that's the first thing that kind of wakes you up to the conflict, then it feels like that's where everything started. And so it does mean that a large portion of people feel like that this terrorist group that is very awful, that they actually, purely are just going in and killing Israeli people out of nowhere, and that all we need to do is kill them all off and everything will be good. And that's not the way to get this situation under control. So Judaism isn't Zionism. Yes, that is so true. And that's something that I've found is conflated very, very commonly across our politics. Ilhan Omar said, in a tone deaf way, I very much admit, back in the day, she was talking about the Israeli lobby that is active in our community. And she made the statement that they were all about the Benjamins, which has been an anti-Semitic trope against Jewish people, that Jewish people are all about the money. And so upon saying that a lobby group, which the point of lobbying is to use money to influence, that's what all lobby groups do. So a technically correct statement that was said in a very tone-deaf way ended up causing a massive uproar. And I think that because it is very important to be careful about your language, because Jewish people have been, have had atrocities committed against them recently. World War II is way too recent. I think that it has little instances like that have added up and made people really, really frightened of saying anything. So it's a really tough thing to discuss, because it is very important to be respectful of Jewish people and how they might feel about how you are talking about a topic that can feel very emotional. And that sort of fear of using the correct rhetoric, I think, needs to be overcome in order of speaking out against actual human rights abuses. And there are a ton of Jewish organizations that have come forward to say how important it is that we support a better treatment for Palestinian civilians. So it's a tough one to talk about. It really is. And I totally get why it has not been on people's radar. But it is also very important to realize that, talking about a government is not talking about the people. And, a lot of the Zionists, especially way early on, a lot of them were like anti-Jewish. Like you got to go back to the beginning of the century. And I'm not saying that everyone who supported the creation of Israel had that sort of intent, but like really early on, there were a lot of like anti-Jewish people that just wanted Jewish people to go somewhere else. So it has been a complicated topic, and it's a tough one to talk about. All right. Both sides have been committing atrocities and have for decades. It's sad innocents pay the price. And that is totally true. And I think that because we are providing aid and support to one side, we have more influence on that side. And so it is important for us to demand more from the side that we have more influence in. Like, we can demand that the hostages are released all day, every day, and we absolutely should say that they need to be released. 100%. Hostages are bad. But we don't have the same type of influence with Hamas that we do with the Israeli government. So that's why it is important for us to discuss how the Israeli government needs to act better, because they're not. So that is a good reason to speak out. Tired of worrying about everyone's feelings, not going to do it anymore. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but that's why I recognized that I needed to spend a lot of time listening to the accounts of people who have grown up in the area and who went to school and were told how important Israel is for their safety, because having that context when you discuss it and having that empathy for people who do feel very unsafe and very angry and have trouble having a conversation that doesn't get very overwhelming and that doesn't have language that's kind of on the extreme side. I think it is important to recognize where they're coming from so that we can have that conversation. And because anti-Semitism does exist and it has been very detrimental for a lot of people, recognizing that even though it has been used as a weapon to get us to shut up about the conflict is important to also recognize as a legitimate thing to try to be sensitive to. And we're going to mess things up. And I think being willing to have the conversation goes a really long way. So I feel like I've been talking a long time, and I have really enjoyed the back and forth that you have given me. I've been really impressed and wasn't really expecting to have such a nuanced conversation with a lot of you. So I'm really, really grateful. And if there's anything else that anybody wanted to like throw in really, really quickly that we needed to go over, it's such a large topic. There's so many things to go over. So I just, I really appreciate that. And let me see, is there anything super major that I like wanted to... There was one other thing that I did want to say. There's right now there's over like 50,000 pregnant women who can't get like services, and a lot of these walls, when people need to go through them, there are people who've like given birth trying to get through the checkpoints. There are babies that have died trying to get through the checkpoints. So I know we kept talking about like the definition of apartheid, but that's another like solid example of the apartheid, because people who want to be able to work in another area to get through these checkpoints, have to be there for hours, and it's a way that people are dehumanized almost on a daily basis. So, it is possible to have a lot of sympathy for the civilians, for the pregnant women, for the children that are in this, situation, while also condemning Hamas and terrorism in the most, serious, fundamental way, and recognizing that this situation can be dealt with more effectively. So, all right. Nice to meet you too, Rusty. He's saying that it's understandable that Israel is nervous. One more thing. Oh my God. Okay. One last thing. Sorry. So, it is a very solid possibility that we will end up in a war with Iran if we continue to support Israel the way that we have. And like, the war with Afghanistan and everything, that was nothing compared to what we're looking at if this war develops. And there are bases in the Middle East outside of this like area where the conflict is happening that have been attacked by drones since this attack occurred, because they feel like that the U.S. is supporting Israel, and they see what Israel is doing against Palestinians. So because there are, other, Muslim nations that are willing to potentially join in this conflict, we are potentially looking at a massive war. Like, you think the last Middle Eastern war was a nightmare? We have not seen anything yet. So that, I'll leave you with that one. That is actually something that could come of this. So calling for a ceasefire, while very unpopular, not only is the most effective way to get rid of Hamas through that targeting stuff we talked about earlier, but also is better for us not getting pulled into a crazy war. It's better for everyone. So let's all call for a ceasefire. Let's not be afraid to be unpopular, because the more we accept being the ones with the unpopular voice, but we approach things with, as much honesty as we can, the better our discourse can be as a group of people. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Have a lovely night and happy Halloween. Thank God we are able to live in a society where we have so many privileges, and I just don't want to forget the people that don't have those privileges. So.